Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi on this Monday, a week before Christmas. Just a little bit of sad news because I know you guys are always asking me about Kovu and how you like to see him when he comes on the screen, and he was a great cat really, but unfortunately he did pass away today. He had another diabetic episode this weekend, and he just basically crashed, and it led to kidney failure, and that was that. So I know you guys, I know you enjoyed seeing him. I know I loved when he would come running as soon as I would start a live video from out of nowhere and jump in front of the screen. So unfortunately he's gone. So I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so let's talk. Let's go on now to Christmas and the rest of this week, because we do have a lot going on in terms of what models are doing, and we still have these teleconnection indices, and I'm going to start with them tonight because they are stretched to some extreme levels in many areas, from the Pacific North America pattern to the EPO index. We're strongly negative on the PNA index, and we are going to be off the wall negative on the EPO index. So all of this is basically telegraphing the fact that the EPO, at least the strongly negative EPO, telegraphing that there is going to be a pretty brutal cold air mass that will be coming into the United States next week, particularly for the plains and for the upper Midwest, where some places are going to get down to -20 or lower for overnight lows. And this kind of air mass in this time in the end of December is a little unusual. It's pretty darn cold to be at this stage. When we see them in mid to late January or early February, you sort of expect it, but it's just a little. It's pushing the upper end of the limit here. As far as the cold air, and that cold air is going to go all the way down into the deep south. So the question for the east is going to be, is there going to be enough of an eastward push? The NAO goes briefly negative here at the end of this week before it sharply turns positive. So that just basically will keep weather systems moving along. But the thing I'm going to be watching too is the fact that we're going to see we are going to see the PNA go toward the neutral line, and then it's forecast, at least right now, to go positive toward the end of the month. So we're going to watch that, because when you get a positive PNA and a negative EPO, there's that's usually a pretty good combination for winter weather in the coastal Northeast. So we're going to pay attention to that. Of course, before that, we're going to deal with the Christmas possibilities. So why don't we? I'll go to just give you some current weather. The weather for this week, much of the week, is going to be on the quiet side until we start to get the upper trough to swing in, which it will do. And we've got just a couple of weak systems here to deal with here. There's a weak system producing some rain across parts of the Gulf states. That's going to be passing by well to the south off the Carolinas and gradually weakening as it moves eastward. So it's really of no consequence. So at least for the first part of this week, weather is going to be relatively tranquil. So we can jump now to where we're going with this for the weekend and beyond, because there are going to be basically two events to worry about and to talk about. So I'm just trying to center this up for you so we can get the bring the latest GFS model run, and we're going to look at the European as well. By the way, I'm as big a snow lover as anybody. I really am. But if the models aren't showing it to me, I'm unless I get a good feeling or a good indication that models are wrong, it's kind of hard to go against what they're saying, and I'll get into more of that a little bit later. The reason why I'm bringing that up is that it seems like I did put a post on my website regarding the fact that, to me, it looks like, at least for the coastal Northeast, the idea of a white Christmas, the odds seem to be dimming at the moment based on what we're seeing, and my God, I must have committed some sort of sacrilege, I guess. But nonetheless, this is not model hugging on my part. If I call for snow, I'm model hugging. If I don't call for snow, I'm model hugging. So I guess I'm making both sides of the the equation here upset with me. So that probably means I'm doing the right thing. But let's go forward here on what's happening at the surface. And there's your low that goes out underneath. Now, cold air starts to pour into the west, and we've got actually a fairly decent snow event here to look forward to across the northern Rockies, and that low is going to translate southeastward into the central Rockies. So you folks in Colorado might get to see some snow, and look for some big temperature changes to occur in Denver. You're going to go from low 60s to below zero before this is all said and done. Now that low is going to run up toward the Great Lakes, so we're going to set up for some rain here later Friday night into Saturday until a cold front comes through. And in the meantime, we're the first of two pushes of very cold air start to come in, and you've got this, fairly what I would describe as a brutally cold air mass coming into the northern plains and upper Midwest. Here's the lead push, and here's the secondary push that comes in late in the weekend and into Christmas Day. Meanwhile, that front in the east is going to stall out, and there's going to be a wave developing on it. But the problem is that the first push of cold air, the first push of cold air basically gets overwhelmed by the second push as the upper trough swings around. Much of that is going to be more to the south rather than to the east, at least initially. So when that wave comes up, there may not be a whole lot of cold air to play around with, at least at first glance. And, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it here. This wave would move up with mostly rain for coastal areas. Yes, it might be snow for areas in upstate New York and in northern New England, but I'm thinking for the coast now, and models have been kind of going back and forth on this, and I understand that, and I understand too that this could wind up, this could certainly be a point where maybe models are going to start shifting east, but if they're going to do that, they're going to have to do it with the upper air. The upper air's got to show it to me, and I'll just wait to render a verdict on that. But from what I'm seeing right now, it's kind of it's kind of hard for me to go that way. Look at this air mass here. I'm going to pull up the 2 meter temperatures because this is really cold stuff. As far as the normals are concerned, this entire area is running 20 or more degrees below normal, and in some cases, as much as 30 degrees or more below normal, I would imagine. That's brutally cold here by the time we get to, this is the day after Christmas. This is Christmas morning. So this is Christmas morning. All these folks here, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, the upper Midwest, up to Wisconsin, except for the extreme eastern part, but even there too, it's going to be pretty cold. We'll look at the 2 meter temperatures, and look at this. I mean, these are low temperatures here. We're talking minus 20 or lower across much of the Dakotas and Montana on up into western Wisconsin. You've got temperatures down almost to zero at Chicago. Although look how from Chicago, just west of Chicago, where temperatures are near zero, and then just go basically a handful of miles, and you're looking at lows in the 20s. You can see where the freezing line is in the east here on Christmas morning. It's well north and west of the coast. All the cold air, when we move this, you'll see where all the cold air is actually, see how it's migrating more south than it is going east. And that's a problem. Eventually, the cold air does get into the east, and then the air mass begins to moderate, but then there's colder air that builds up again toward the very end of December and into January, and that's where we're going to watch that positive PNA and that negative EPO, because some of that cold air is going to try to come back into the U.S. But let me back up now and show you why I'm not at this point, even though models have been flipping back and forth. The fact that the overnight model runs were colder and then suddenly came in warmer, except for the European. But let me just show you what the problem is. And here's our upper air now. And I want you to watch the trough that comes down in the west for this weekend. We're still into Wednesday and Thursday. Now here's the system that's swinging out from the Pacific Northwest and dropping down into the Rockies. and then starts to come eastward. Now here we are at Friday. You start to see that upper trough in the north beginning to drop down and get involved. But the push again, you notice that in the last few frames of that loop. I'll run it by you again. You see how there's an arm here that's swinging eastward, but that kind of gets overwhelmed by the second energy that's coming down, and that trough just drops almost straight south. You need that to come further east. You need to get that cold air further east, and as a result, there's a little more ridging along the east coast, and you just wind up with the cold air being locked along and west of the Appalachians rather than bringing it to the coast when that wave goes by. Once that wave goes by, the trough does swing east. And then on the GFS, and I don't believe this, it does this really weird thing. And I showed it to one of my colleagues today, and it's like, have you ever seen this before? Now, usually with these troughs, it likes to swing it around. The GFS, for some reason, is taking part of this and swinging it around into southeastern Canada, but the back edge of this basically splits off and moves west-southwestward. I have never seen any sea models do this in the wintertime. I have seen them retrograde systems in the, deeper into the spring, in the summer, and in the fall. Occasionally you'll have, that happening sometimes in a larger scale up to the north in Canada when you've got blocks around, and the block will retrograde, or occasionally even the upper load would retrograde, but I've never really quite seen that. I'll show it to you again, where the bottom of this basically just splits off and then drops southwestward off the California coast. It just looks really, really weird to me. So I'm kind of not going to buy that idea in the longer range, and for now I'm going to ignore it, which probably means it will be right. So let me show you the Europeans' problem, because the European overnight was much warmer and much further west than the GFS, and today's was really no different. When we look at the European model, same idea. You can see that trough, and the European is even further west than the GFS is. I mean, here it is. This is Christmas Day, where the trough is, almost at 95 west. It's not even, if it were at 90 or at, if it was at 90, I would be, kind of, then I would, certainly be looking at this very closely. But the trough is this far west. We've got no chance for snow here in the coastal Northeast. It's just not going to happen. Here's the new GFS with its trough. You can also see how the trough on the how the upper low is much more shaped like a bowl, whereas the European has got this a bit differently. It's got more of a V shape to the trough. And then you see how it swings around, and it doesn't really do what the GFS does in the southwest. It actually brings in a separate system underneath the split flow that's in the Pacific, and that to me makes more sense. This is at the 28th now of December, and you've got a fairly strong northwest flow. So what the European would suggest, by the way, if we look at the limited surface maps that we have, is that we're going to take a surface low up the Appalachians. So this is now the first low that goes for Friday into Saturday. Here's the stalled front runs from coastal Texas, and it doesn't even have it through New York City at this point. And there's the wave on the European. It basically takes it up the Appalachians because of the sharpness of the trough, and then it winds up going up into eastern Canada, west of Nova Scotia. And if that happens, it's going to be raining in 50s over a lot of this area here on Christmas Day until the front goes by. So again, I'm going to have to see some pretty large scale changes on the upper airs of both models in order to be sold on the idea of a white Christmas. So where is a white Christmas going to occur? So that's we don't have the European snow maps, but we can just kind of look at the GFSs and then just say, okay, let's adjust it. Let's adjust it to the west. So here is, I'm going to show you the 24-hour snowfall first, so you can see where it's going to be snowing this week. And the first place will be in the Rockies, on up through the Central Plains in a narrow band, and it's bringing some snows into much of Wisconsin except the extreme south. Then this system, of course, translates to the northeast. We're now coming into Christmas Eve, and you see where the snow sets up. Now, where the snow sets up here is where the European would have it, with its wave coming up the west side of the Appalachians, and not much more, except up into western parts of upstate New York and northern New York and into central and northern New England. Whereas the GFS wants to have a bit of a southern flank here because it has a flatter wave, given the fact that it has a flatter upper air. So this is the 24-hour snowfall as far as, you know, areas for a white Christmas. Now I'll show you the total snowfall between now and next Tuesday. So let's back up. We'll go to this is for 1 a.m. Tuesday morning. So this is the total snowfall over the next 7.5 days on the models, and you know, you can see where at least where the purple areas are 6 inches plus. So if you go on the bluish white shading and you're talking about 3 inches plus, I don't necessarily believe this southern flank. If the European is right, that southern flank will not exist here in my neck of the woods. But the northern Rockies do pretty well. You folks in the central Rockies will do well because of that big shot of cold air coming down just in time for Christmas. I wish it would be a white Christmas. Those are nice. I know it gets in people's way and everything, but you know, maybe a little bit of snow would be a nice thing. I'm not going to completely throw it off the table, but it's right now, you know, we've certainly been dealt a blow here today with today's model runs after last night. Why don't we take a look at what's going on in Europe, and then we'll take a look at southeastern Canada. And in the long range, it looks to get pretty stormy again in the North Atlantic. Right now, it's fairly quiet. Weather systems are pretty weak for this week. But as we move into next week, this is Christmas Day, some snows in Northern Ireland and the northern part of Scotland. There's a fairly intense low in the North Atlantic between England and Greenland that's moving along there. Pressure's in the gets down to 940. And eventually some colder air may come in on this as we go into the longer range. And there's another very intense storm heading for Ireland here. This is on day 9 with some cold air around. So, you know, the models have been kind of showing this idea of a very stormy North Atlantic in the long range for the last 4 or 5 days. So, you know, so it seems to be fairly consistent here with that idea. Back in North America, we're going to take a look at eastern Canada. Because I know that there's been some snow from Friday's system that brought the snow to my area. It wound up bringing some big snows to parts of Newfoundland. And here is the system with the cold front that comes through me with nothing. You get a nice little low that runs up into Quebec with some snows scattered through the end of the week. Then we've got the waves. The first one goes up the St. Lawrence Valley, or just east of the St. Lawrence Valley, so that's mostly rain for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, with, of course, it snows in Labrador and Quebec. And now as the cold air arrives for the Christmas Day system, that's a little bit further east, so we get some snows up into northern New England and on up into New Brunswick, and eventually into Newfoundland once the low goes by. And beyond that, we're into you know, silly time in the long range, so you know, we'll kind of leave it there and not go any further. So that's pretty much where I'm going with all this. I am not completely closing the door on the models changing somewhat, but you know, I've demonstrated to you with what we're seeing today, what we're going to have in order for, you know, a white Christmas to come to pass. Abaddon, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the kind words about my my Kovu. Yeah, you know, by the way, you know, he was over at one point. He was over 20 pounds. I mean, he was a big cat, and he lost half of his body weight when we discovered the diabetes. Today he weighed in at just around 5 pounds. I mean, he was really just wasting away. I tried to, help, regulate his diet, try to help him put on some weight, and it just wasn't happening. And then when he just this weekend, when his kidneys began to shut down and he just, became very, very weak, it was pretty apparent today when I took him to the vet that it was time to go. So, I kept my Cody probably a little longer than I should have, but it's very, it's tough. But I appreciate all the kind words. Let's see. Let me just type a big thank you to you, sir, for doing that. And David Schwartz, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's tough. I had 2 of them go. 14 for my dog, and Sean Kate, thank you very much again. Guys, it's okay. I really appreciate it. You don't have to do that for me. Thank you. I really appreciate it, though. Let's go to take a couple of weather questions. I know, Joshua, you would rather have it on a school day, but you take what we can get. Yeah, weather and low. The odds of you getting snow on any particular day in the wintertime where you are in Norfolk are pretty low, so I'm thinking you don't have to worry about going to Key West. You should be, maybe taking all of us with you with this brutally cold air mass coming down. There were no white Christmases for several years after the 97-98 El Nino. No surprise, no disappointment. Correct, Tom Adams. White Christmases are rare events in much of the country. In fact, when you think about it, most of the world is, the southern hemisphere is in summertime. So a good chunk of the world, they're on the beach, okay? And, there's only a small portion of the world where it's cold enough for snow at the end of December. We happen to be in it where I am in New York City and points northward, Boston, and so on. But you got to have the right setup, and the odds of having snow on the ground on Christmas Day, actually snow on the ground, is 1 in 4. There's about a 20 to 25% chance in New York City of having snow on the ground. For it to actually snow on Christmas Day, the odds are even longer. There's something like 1 in 12, 1 in 13. Snowfalls on Christmas Day are, if you look back at the records, for some reason there's not a lot of them. There's a handful. There's a bunch just past Christmas, like on the 26th, 27th, and 28th, and there's a bunch going into Christmas. But for some reason, right around those days, there seems to be this, lack of snow events. And the same seems to happen around New Year's for some odd reason. Probably just a series of perfect coincidences and nothing else. Yes, I got your question answered there, weather and low. You'll be fine, okay? I promise. So do I see a pattern being consistent with the cold air in the next few weeks going into January, or are we going to have this 50-degree weather come back again? Look, there's always moderation even in the coldest of patterns. You do get days, a day here or 2 days here and there, where you're going to see temperatures moderate. Consistently, to have 90 days of the winter season, to have 90 consecutive days of below average temperatures just isn't going to happen. All right. Could you have, a couple of weeks? Sure. Could you have 3 weeks worth where it's below average? Yeah, I've actually seen that, and maybe even longer, with the peppered day here and there that's near normal or a little bit above. That, I think, is certainly, that it's if it's consistently cold, yeah, I mean, it certainly could see long stretches of below average, but, there is moderation going on. Conan Degnan, nice to see you here. My predictions for Europe in January. Well, Connor, I haven't I'm not a big long range guy as a whole. Let's see. I'm sorry. Here we go. I'm not a long range. I'm just trying to read one of the comments. The predictions for Europe in January. I'm not a real long-range guy, and I'm still having I'm still kind of unfamiliar with how weather works in Europe, but I'm gradually learning. So, you know, that's going to take me a little bit of time to figure out. But you certainly are going. It looks like you're going into a stormy pattern for the end of the month and the beginning of the new year. Scott Olson, I'm not understanding. Your 28-minute commercial popped up. I don't know why that happened. I don't have any control about that with that. Google does all that stuff. But I can't imagine they would have thrown in a 28-minute commercial. So, you know, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Let's see. I think the 26th will get snow in Ireland and the UK. Always smiling. Let me look and see once again what's happening up there. Okay, I suddenly lost my tropical tidbits. Let's see what's happening. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna bring up Europe. I'm doing this all off screen, folks. I'm just for speed purposes, which of course right now is not exactly very fast. I'm having a little bit of a tough time. You do have chances, I think, next week. You know, I really think you do. With one of these big storms should be able to bring in some colder air, so I do think you will have chances with regards to that. So fingers crossed on that. Oh, Abbott, did they put extremely long ads in sometimes? Oh, I'm sorry about that. All right, I'll see what I can do to fix that, because I really don't like the fact that they do throw in ads in between sometimes. I know with these like mid rolls that they do, but let me see what I can do with regards to that. Okay, there we go. So, you know, I think, folks, we'll stop it here. You're gonna have cold air coming in. We're gonna have some opportunities along the way. Winter's just starting; it's not over yet. And yes, Carso Bayando, a white Christmas for Northeast Ohio snowbelt and surrounding areas. I think so. You know, as soon as that wave goes by, or even before the wave goes by, you might get into some lake effect there too. Any chances the PDO trends? Are you talking about the PDO or the PNA? The PNA is forecast actually on today on the overnight ensemble runs. The PNA is forecast to go positive at the end of next week. Remember that those indices do change day to day as models change, so they're not fixed. They're going to adjust as models adjust. So we're going to pay attention to them as we go forward. Get that PNA positive with the negative EPO, and you know the wintertime in the east could be very, very interesting indeed. And even right now, it looks pretty interesting to me. So anyhow, let's leave it at that, folks. We will be back tomorrow, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Website posts on meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Boy, I'm having a tough day today, folks. I'm sorry. At meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and you can catch me on my Facebook page at meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Like someone pointed out here just a little while ago, and thank you. Yeah, it's been a very long day for me. This has not been the best of months, losing both my dog and my cat. So again, thank you very much for all your kind words. I really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.